Good morning. It's still morning. Monday morning here in Long Beach. And I'm coming live on my regular page. I don't do that often. But I figure, I might as well do it more because what I've been sharing like in my yoga group and other ways, and sometimes I'll share it on here. But I don't know. I suppose if more of you could get anything out of any of it, then if this is the way to get it to you, then I'll do it. And I'll override my thoughts that maybe I'm like invading your moment with my face in your feed and figure, you know what? You can stop if you want, right? Yeah, so I'm so excited and kind of having fun really talking about this tool now that's like this thing that people are talking about and even bringing in as like a business training or as a health practice for adults or kids, this thing called mindfulness. And really, when I get into studying and much less sharing about what I see that mindfulness is, it really is kind of hilarious and weird that it's become such a thing. But it also shows us how these days so many of us are really holding ourselves, being in our moments in ways that aren't actually very natural, right? And that's why it may not feel so good or be flowing so great and or be manifesting as mood, mind stuff, much less health stuff, right? Or just life not feeling or flowing great. But the thing with mindfulness is really, as I take a look at what it really is, which I want to share with you a little and even share out of this classic book that you might know about called Wherever You Go, There You Are. Mindfulness Meditation in Everyday Life by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's like one of the classic teachers on mindfulness and meditation. And he is the MD, I believe he's an MD, who has brought this into things like Mayo Clinic, other places doing research with like heart disease patients, really helping people bring this in the simplest, most practical, everyday ways that are totally like part of therapy and healing now. So anyways, Jon Kabat-Zinn, he has some great ways of explaining that I wanted to share with you as I've found myself like prepping to talk about this thing called mindfulness. And I do want to mention something kind of hilarious too, is that for a while I decided I didn't even like this word mindfulness. I didn't even use it, especially when I was teaching or do teach about yoga or meditation, and instead using words like presence. Because one of my favorite scholarly teachers along the way, Ravi Ravindra, who I got to go learn with at the Ojai Yoga Crib, which has been one of my like amazing learning growth places over the years, Ravi brought up one time that this idea of mindfulness is kind of an interesting word and idea to go for, because if we're saying it like a mind that's full, then maybe do we really want a mind that's full? Is that what we're going for in these practices or in this lifestyle or whatever we're exploring with some of this stuff? So I thought, mindfulness. Who wants mindfulness? But as more and more people are using it, and even Jon Kabat-Zinn uses it, I've been looking at more like what can that mean? And now I could see maybe instead we see it as it's bringing the mind more fully into right now, which turns out is like a really radical thing to do for most of us these days, because often we're so doing the opposite, right? We're so not here and now. We're so thinking about other things, for instance, about tomorrow, right? Worrying about things in the future, fretting about things in the past, doing all sorts of things in the mind, and also really kind of stuck, trapped in our minds and super disconnected from our bodies. which is really an interesting state for us to have gotten ourselves in, because our bodies are such a part of our sensing mechanisms. And I really learned this from so many teachers, but a lot from being at Kyle Cease events. He has been talking about this, and it really helped me see this, how we're like this culture walking around like so in our heads that it's actually become this like epidemic, because it turns out it doesn't feel good to just be in our heads. And then often, again, we're in our heads in ways that are so not being present, and also in ways that are making us miserable, right? And making us miss our moments, right? And even making us sick and tired and unhappy. So if instead we play with the power of just this simple thing that has now become a practice, which is so interesting, because it's really like the way that we humans were built to exist. We could see, in a sense, like as animals, it's kind of us becoming even more like animals again, just remembering to be in our moments more, in our bodies more, in our senses more, and in a little less judgmental way, maybe, as part of what makes it different, and just observing. And that might also mean like looking at what's happening on the inside too. So that starts to tell you like some of what I see mindfulness can be. But I also want to share from Jon Kabat-Zinn, this practitioner and teacher from the years back, that he says, because he says it in a couple really beautiful ways that I think are worth listening to, that mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, right? And non-judgmentally. That is a piece that's kind of, again, probably different than a lot of the ways that we're tending to be in our moments. And this is always coming from my own experience with myself. So me learning to love myself through all this, realizing too. And then I love this, because this is really, you might have seen that I had this really lovely feedback that I got from a parent, where I got to go bring this kind of these ideas to a group of parents through a PTA up in LA. And one of the parents was really kind and replied to some of the email offerings I gave them afterwards, and some of her experience of the workshop. And she really, like, this stuck with her so much. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad, because it's so beautiful. And it really reminds us why this would be worth it. Because he says the key to this path, which really lies at the root, he says, of Buddhism, Taoism, yoga, we find in the works of Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, Native American wisdom, is an appreciation for the present moment. Really is what we're doing with mindfulness, and the cultivation of an intimate relationship with it, right? And then he says, this is it, the thing that the mom really got, and I think she said she even shared this with her kids, is that mindfulness, it's the direct opposite of taking life for granted, right? Which, I don't know about you, but I always feel like anything that helps me do that, I appreciate, because I always get so pissed when I realize I am taking life for granted, right? And that's where that judgment comes in and doesn't help. So this mindfulness thing, some of why it's getting talked about so much, though, I realize, and getting so much attention as such a therapy, even though it's the simplest of things, and really, again, part of how we're wired to be as humans. That's what's so almost hilarious about it, that it's become this practice. You know, it's on the cover of Time magazine. Mindfulness is like saving the day, doing all these things. And then when you look at what it is so simply, and how it is really one of the ways we were wired to be in the moment. And so part of the reason why the opposite of mindfulness, maybe the thing that a lot of us are doing a lot of the time instead, feels so not good, perhaps. Not only because we're taking life for granted, maybe, and missing our moments, right? But also because part of that truth there seems to be that when we're super just in our heads and not in our bodies and not in the moment, we're almost like missing out on a big part of being human that's important in how we function and how we even make decisions and experience the world, right? And so that just also goes with, it seems to be, and sometimes maybe that's some of why the symptoms come up in the body. It's almost like calling us back into the body, right, in various ways. So that's where we can see that anything that brings us back into our bodies seems to be such therapy these days, right? Because, again, so many of us have gotten where we just are in our heads all day long. Me too, right? Because it can seem fun, almost. But then, right, the propensity for what we might do in our head that maybe isn't always the most, like, helpful, right, or functional, or, like, creating what we do want in various levels. So it gives us that chance to come back into the body, come back into the moment, and it turns out that's such a therapy and such a medicine for us, and it just feels better. And yeah, I love to mention how we can see that, like, children are so in that place, right? So that's where being with children can help us be in that place more of just being in the moment, listening, feeling, noticing, right? Much less appreciating, and being in our bodies too as part of it all. And then that non-judgment, though, is part of it, right? To be willing to just be present with it, I guess, in that more open way. But then also, here's where the therapy is too, I see with the mindfulness, is for sure, the more that we do whatever we can do to get us in that more present place, and that mindfulness and getting us more into the moment and in our body and here and now, right? Yeah, part of what we notice is going to be what's going on for us, you know, how we are feeling, what we are thinking about, what we are worrying about, what's on our heart, what's on our mind, much less what's going on with our body, right? And, you know, even though that may not be pleasant, it seems to be important, right? Because the opposite would be like not being aware of what's happening in how we're feeling and how what's going on in our mind and how that's going and how that's maybe part of how our life is going. So it does give us that chance. So that's part of the medicine too. And then that's like just the same that meditation does, in my opinion. And so that non-judgment helps with all of that. That it helps us come in our mindfulness, whatever, and we can turn anything into a mindfulness practice. That's what was so fun to like talk to these parents about, is like, I'm not asking you to put anything new on your to-do list, really. This is just about like changing how you might use your moments you're already in, right? And it's really nice to do it as a way, just like when you notice you're not feeling good or feeling stressed or worried. Like this workshop was about stress relief, which was kind of, they picked the topics, the people who invited me. So it was interesting for me to like create from there. But how does this reduce stress? You know, how does mindfulness reduce stress? I can see is that, first of all, just that very act of letting anything we're doing, like, and even things like washing the dishes or doing the laundry or driving in the car or being in a conversation or anything. And again, kids are really going to call us into the moment more, which is great for us parents most of the time. But so it turns out that just feels better, right? To do anything that gets us more in our bodies, more in the moment, and more in that place of being able to not take it for granted, right? But then also it gives us that chance to have more opportunities to be present with what is happening on the inside and how we are feeling and thinking and focusing, and from that non-judgmental place, you know, also making it about like how can we love ourselves through that and then respond solution-oriented, and or, you know, so whatever we're noticing, right? So if we're noticing we're tired, you know, can we build in a nap, right? Or I don't know, you know, there's various ways that we are going to be noticing, and that's where that non-judgment really helps. So yeah, I'm just having fun sharing the simplicity of it, and yet it's such a therapy. And then yeah, it's kind of hilarious and weird that it's become a practice, right? Because it's really like just so how maybe we were built to be just in the moment, listening, feeling, sensing, noticing in that presence. Which again, though, as soon as I say it, I feel myself doing it, and it's like, oh wow, that's really different than the way I just was already being. So that's where this really comes from, my own experience, and I'm just sharing along my journey, right? What works for me, and you know, people I get to share with. So hopefully maybe this helps you see how you could bring this in if you're interested, and that it's such a simple thing, and it's not about adding anything new to you, to your to-do list, that it's more about playing with how you're being in your moments of any sort, and then knowing there's total medicine to it, though, that just the act of coming back in your body, coming back in your senses, right? And then you might remember to breathe a little differently or relax, and some of the things you can do from there, or laugh, or cry, which is all therapy too, right? Yeah. So, mindfulness, the opposite of taking life for granted, and so simple and easy, and something we can do with ourselves, to ourselves, any moment, but hugely powerful, it turns out, and total therapy and medicine, and a chance to get more in touch with what is happening for us, and much less deal with it, right? So it can really like change our lives, right? And much less reduce stress and help us feel more and flow more how we want to. So yeah, so thank you so much for your time and attention. If you're still here, such a big deal these days in such a full, rich world of opportunities and possibilities, right? So thank you for taking your time here, and let me know if there's any ways I can support you in the ways that you're using any of this to take care of you, right? Because that's what it seems to become about for us, and I seem to be here offering ways to do that. So thank you so much, and loving you all. Talk to you soon. Namaste.